this party started. Okay, friends, welcome. I have a special guest here today. Shannon Anderson is going to be able to introduce herself more fully, but I just want to say that I ran into Shannon's Instagram post probably about a year ago. I loved her positive energy, and I just thought all the things that she's doing is really impressive. Author is just one of her cool titles, but the fact that she's a speaker, she's a professor at a college, she does a lot of things that it's really cool to see how she's all molded it together. And one of my favorite things about her that she spoke about in her TED talk as well was like figuring out and living her dream. And for those of you who are into the world I'm into, I love the term ikigai. And I know that she brings that up a little bit in her TED talk as well. But I'm excited to learn about your journey, Shannon, and also then how all of this crazy different stuff came to be into a life that you're really enjoying that's full of impact in that. So, first of all, on behalf of everyone, Shannon, we just want to say thanks for being here. And how are you doing this evening?
I'm great. Thank you. I was excited to be invited to be a part of this. And this is so awesome that you have this for personal growth. And gosh, educators need to be able to lean on each other. I taught elementary school for 25 years, and my daughter, who was actually just here, I made her a chicken pot pie for dinner. She teaches first grade at Heritage Christian in Indianapolis. I live in the Indianapolis area. Have another daughter who's a zoology major, and but she's off in Illinois. So yeah, life is good.
Awesome. I love that. Now, is she with zoology hoping to work at one of the zoos near us, Brookfield or Lincoln Park?
Possibly, not sure. Or an exotic animal clinic, possibly. I'm not sure what she'll do with that. Just so she's with animals, she'll be happy. So as you can imagine, with me always pushing to, go with your passion, she's passionate about animals. So it's just important for her to do something with animals.
Love that.
Yeah.
My daughter is begging to have a dog, and we're the meanest parents in the world.
Oh,
So if anyone needs their dogs walked, I told her she could make money while taking care of dogs, and they won't live at my house. So it's the best of both worlds. So she's up for hire. She's almost 10, though. So she's got to get some experience under her belt. But okay. Well, Shannon, first of all, again, your resume speaks for itself. Thank you for all your dedication to the education system. And I know you were saying that tomorrow you're going and driving somewhere to have a book talk where you get to present your book and help kids write in that. So, still being able to fulfill your passion of being an educator, but maybe in a slightly different look, I think is a really cool idea for a lot of educators because we have a lot of different unique talents and experiences. And I think that transfers in a lot of areas. But before we dig into all that, I'd love to know a little bit about like how the heck did you become a published children's author that has been successful, done well, and it really get to share your love of writing and reading with other people. If you'd be willing to just kind of walk us through what that was like, if there was any crazy struggles or crazy surprises on something that was easy, I think it would just be cool to hear your perspective and point of view on that.
yeah, sure. So I feel like I had some seeds planted along the way. And when I was a kid, I was one of those that as soon as I learned how to write, I was writing in diaries all the time. I mean, I would write about my day, I would come up with a little poem, or, if I was mad at my little sisters, I'd write about it. And I was just always writing in diaries. And then when I was in fifth grade, our school had our first ever author visit. And this is part of the reason I'm so passionate about doing author visits because it really did something for me. It inspired me because I was someone who loved writing. And here's this person whose job is writing and she writes books. And so when she came, she had a school-wide writing contest leading up to her visit. And we could submit our story however we wanted in whatever form we wanted. So I had taken a notebook and ripped off the cover and made my own cover and wrote the story in the pages of that notebook. And it was Jamie Gilson. She wrote Can't Catch Me, I'm the Gingerbread Man. And I still remember all of us sitting on the gym floor and her walking up in front of us, and she was holding her book, Can't Catch Me on the Gingerbread Man, but she was also holding my notebook. And I knew that that was good news. And sure enough, she called my name. I got to come up and shake her hand, and she gave me the copy of her book. I still have the copy of my notebook that I wrote all those years ago in fifth grade. And it wasn't just special because I won the contest. It was special because it was the first time I ever thought of my writing in a different way. Because before I was writing in diaries and journals and poems for myself. But having her, like, I guess, validate that she liked my story made me want to write for others too. And so that just kind of switched things for me and it made me want to write for others. And so then if we fast forward to my high school, when I was a junior and senior in high school, my high school job was working at the public library in the children's section. And so our public library was upstairs was the adult area, and the whole downstairs was the children's section. And so at 4 o'clock every day, the children's librarian left for the day. And I got to come in from 4 to 8 when the library closed. And I had the whole downstairs. Like I still today can't believe they like trusted this high school kid to be in charge of the whole downstairs every night, but I was. And I really loved that job. I was surrounded by all these books that I had read as a kid. I fell in love with kids' books again. I loved it when a lot of times parents would come and they would go upstairs and they would just send their kids down to me. And I would help them find a book they might enjoy, or I would read with them. And I always thought it was a special perk. Like when a brand new book would come in, I got to read it before anyone else could check it out. It was like, oh, I get a bonus. And so just seeing those books made me think about how cool it would be if one day, one of my stories could become an actual book and then end up on one of those shelves. Like that would be surreal. And so I just kind of kept that tucked away, and another seed planted to having that job. But I wrote in my senior year diary that someday I wanted to be a teacher and I wanted to write children's books. And I wasn't really sure how that was all going to happen. But my story with becoming a teacher was because my mom was a very young mom. She was 16 when she got pregnant, and she dropped out of high school to raise me, and we didn't have much. And when I was in high school taking all the hard math classes and everything, I was able to convince her to get her GED and tutor her through it. And so it was through that and seeing the impact of an education and having her be able to get a job that made me want to be a teacher. And so my senior year, I was like, that's it. I'm going to be a teacher and I'm going to write children's books too. And, becoming a teacher is a clear-cut path. You major in elementary education, and then you take the exam and you apply at elementary schools. And then hopefully you get a job. I mean, nowadays you do get a job because they need teachers so desperately. But being a children's book author is not a clear-cut path. There is no children's book author major, and there isn't like a job you apply for and you get to do it. It's something that you have to learn by going to classes and workshops and going to conferences and getting critiques and being mentored by people and finding out like through the ropes of other people how they did it, and just really flinging yourself out there and your work out there and being completely vulnerable and ready for lots of rejection, because there are a lot of people trying to get their stories made into books. And each publisher only gets to do so many books a year. So some publishers only do 2 or 3 books a year, and they have thousands of submissions. And so you have all that competition for, your story making it into their list that year. So I've had a lot of life lessons through trying to get published, but it wasn't until 2010 is the year it was. And there was this amazing opportunity to do a creativity fellowship through the Eli Lilly Foundation. So I'm an Indiana teacher, and they offer this to Indiana teachers. I'm sure other states might offer something similar, where you get to the whole point, which bless them, their whole point is to refresh and renew teachers because they know it's hard. They know that people are burning out. And so they offer this creativity fellowship, and you write this grant proposal to get to pursue a passion. And it doesn't even have to be in the area that you teach. Now, it just so happens writing children's books is like right in there with what I was doing, teaching elementary school, because of course I'm teaching writing. Of course I'm doing read alouds of amazing stories all the time. But I ended up getting the grant. I remember it was $8,000 at the time. Now I think it's up to like 15,000, but It was 8,000. I bought my first ever laptop computer and I went to LA to a children's book writing conference that had like 1,000 people in attendance. I went to another conference in Georgia and I started taking online writing classes. And that's how I really got started. And so it was through all of the learning that I started figuring out like how to do the craft of writing for kids because there are definite different ways to write for kids and there are so many different genres. I mean, you might have an easy reader or an early reader, or you might have a picture book, or you might have a chapter book, or you might have a board book, or you might have a middle grade. I mean, there are all different things that you have to learn about writing for kids. And then there's this other learning curve that you have to go through to learn how to like be an author, like how to submit your manuscript, how to format it. Do you submit it to an editor or an agent first or simultaneously? And how do you know who's taking what? And so it was a lot of learning. And my very first book was I Am Not a Pirate. It's about my daughter Maddie, who had to wear an eye patch for 3 years. She has amblyopia. And so that finally got published. And this is while I was still teaching. And I had lots of schools that would ask me, to come and talk about, like, could you do this thing like for our family literacy night? Or could you do our young author conference or whatever? Because they knew as a teacher, I can't take off and just leave my school to go to their school. And so it became a thing where it was like, okay, fall breaks and spring breaks, I'm doing author visits. And my principal was really cool and let me take my 3 personal days for author visits. And not all schools would allow something like that. But anyway, just like once it started going is kind of like anything else where the momentum starts building a little. And the other thing is once you get your foot in the door with a publisher, as long as you're not a diva and you meet your deadlines and you're still producing good work, they want to keep working with you because they have an established relationship. And so I ended up doing 3 books with that same publisher and then started working with other publishers. But as far as you mentioned struggles, and if I'm talking too much, just stop me, or if you have questions,
No,
because
you're doing great.
I'll
You're
keep going.
rolling. I love it.
Um, as far as struggles go, yes, there are lots of struggles, lots and lots of rejections. I mean, you hear, oh, Dr. Seuss got 27 rejections, for his first book, and J.K. Rowling had 12. Big deal. Like I have way more than that. And this book here, so I love strawberries. This one is like my baby. This one I wrote in 2010, and I took it to that first writing conference that I went to, and it won first place in their contest, just as a story, not illustrated or anything, just as a manuscript. And so I was thinking, oh, like I've got this, like I figured it out. And do you know that I submitted this book for 10 years before it finally got picked up by a publisher? 10 years. And that story, of course, I was publishing other books along the way, but that one, for whatever reason, I just kept getting no's. Either it's a little bit longer than a standard picture book. It has, Jolie, the main character, is I kind of have it after me because she likes writing in a diary. So you see her diary entries, and she's trying to convince her parents that she should be able to grow her own strawberry patch. And I used to have my own strawberry patch. And so there are all these things that she's me. So I wanted this story to come out, and she's very determined. My mom used to always say I was strong-willed, but I always tried to turn it into a positive that I was very determined. And so Jolie is determined. And the author of this book had to be determined because I kept getting no's. And sometimes they would say it was because having her diary entries, plus the regular narrative text, plus the illustration of what's going on in the story, but also what she's thinking would be difficult. And so a lot of people just didn't want to touch it because it would be hard to illustrate. But eventually it did come out. And this book, I've written over 20 books. This one has won more awards than any of them combined, has sold more than any of them combined, and it was rejected for 10 years. So I always tell people to, like if you really believe in something, it's just a matter of finding the right door to open because that book, it ended up getting the National Book of the Year award. It got the Good Housekeeping magazine top rated picture book. And Ryan Reynolds read it last year on his TV show, Bedtime Stories with Ryan. I mean, I was crying. I know. And so you just never know. And now I Love Blueberries is coming out in April of this year because that one did well. That publisher wanted to keep going. And so now I got to write I Love Blueberries, same character. She has a friend now. And because the angle, it's through Feeding Minds Press, which is the publishing arm of the American Farm Bureau Foundation, which I'm thinking, my gosh, they only put out 2 books a year. This is a tiny publisher. Do I finally want the publisher that's taking it, to be this tiny one? But oh my goodness, it's done so well. And so knowing that they're all about agriculture and farming, it changed the way I looked at writing the next book. So in this book, you learn about growing strawberries and you see the whole strawberry life cycle. But in the blueberry book, I decided to put in some modern farming. So this time she's trying to do blueberries hydroponically. And I have a female farmer as the featured farmer in the book. And so I tried to do things that would like bring more to the table than just a story of a determined girl. So, um, but yeah, the probably biggest struggle for me was when I did the whole Ikigai experiment on myself and do it. I did that exercise. And it was when I was trying to figure out, I had taught for 25 years and I was trying to figure out I'm not a person that does things halfway. And I felt like with all of the writing and now doing more speaking and you have to do a lot of your own marketing for your books. And then teaching, as you all know, is more than a full-time job. And so I was really getting pulled thin. And I was a mom. So I, was doing that too. And teaching at the local college in the evenings. So something had to give. And I finally, after 25 years, thought, okay, what I'll do, because I was kind of a chicken, I decided I would do a sabbatical leave for a year because then I had the safety net that if it didn't work out, I could swing right back in and I'd be back in the classroom and I'd be fine. And so I requested in January, and this is significant, of 2020
Mm.
um, for my sabbatical leave to start the next school year. Well, you know where I'm going with this because it was all approved and everything, and I was starting to line up my next year. I mean, I was booking stuff like you wouldn't believe, had all these author visits and speaking events, and I was so excited. And then in March, all of a sudden I'm getting all of these cancellations and emails like, no, there is no more conference. Like, no, that one's canceled. This one's not happening. This one, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, what have I done? And I went to my principal. I asked him if I could rescind my request and wait another year. And he was like, I'm sorry, we already approved your replacement. And he's moving from another town. And he and his wife are, like relocating. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So um, I was like, God, I'm really doing this, aren't I? So I had to take a huge leap there and just do it. And so, yes, I ended up doing some virtual conferences. So I still got to do some speaking and I got a lot of writing done that year. I also did some online, I was teaching online some and doing what I could. I had Spanish camps and writing camps in my house during that time. And you know what? At the end of the year, you have to let them know if you're coming back after your sabbatical. And I thought, if I made it through a global pandemic and I'm still standing and I'm not sharing the food with the cats, I think I'll be okay. And so I said, I'm going to go for it. And so I did. And part of that was doing that Ikigai little exercise. So I took literal post-it notes, lots of them, and I started listing all the things that I love to do. And I made a whole bunch of post-it notes of that. And then all the things that I feel like I are my strengths, things that I'm pretty good at, that I've had a lot of practice with or experience with. And then the things that I feel like I could be valued for or paid for, obviously. And then things that the world needs. And as you know, since you're familiar with Ikigai, if you find that intersection in the middle, if you can find the things that all four of those fit into, what I was finding is the writing and the speaking and the teaching were my Ikigai items, and that I needed to honor those. And some of the things that I was doing, such as tutoring and some of the online things and some of the work for hire writing stuff, which is more like a homework assignment. It's not exciting where you come up with a story idea and you're just dying to write it and you write it and you do all these things with it and then hopefully it becomes a book someday. The work for hire stuff is no, like you have to write this book about Japan and it has to be this many chapters and it has to be done in 2 months and and so when I started looking at my life in that way and seeing the things that yeah, I could do that and I'm fairly good at it, but I wasn't loving it. I didn't feel like the world needed me to do it and I wasn't being highly valued for it if we're honest. The pay wasn't that great. And so I decided, well, what am I doing? Like and I'm at the age, I'm 52. I'm at that midlife crisis age, but I call it the midlife calling because really what it was for me was kind of a wake up call of I I got to do my first part of my dream, elementary teaching for the first half of my life. And now it's time to do this other one. Like I wrote that my senior year in high school. And even though I was young and, probably naive, those were my goals. And I still felt that I wanted to do those things. And so I just kind of took off with it. And it was scary. And at the time, I'm divorced now, but at the time I was still married. So I did have some safety net still because we still had, his income to depend on. But then when we got divorced, it was that whole other leap of faith of, oh gosh, like, do I need to go back in the classroom now? Like, I'm not gonna have insurance, and like, I'm not making very much writing and speaking. I mean, let's be honest, when you're writing a book, I'll give you an example. A $10 book, the royalties the author gets are like 85 cents on a $10 book. And it's because there's a whole team that makes the book. I'm not knocking publishers or anything. It's just a reality. You have an illustrator, you have the editor, you have the art director, you have the cost of printing the book and the paper and the ink and the shipping. I mean, it costs a lot of money to make a book. And so yes, the author doesn't get a huge chunk of that. And the speaking was one of the things that did make more money, but until you've built momentum, it's harder to get those speaking gigs too. And so even though I was willing to travel anywhere, and I did, like that next year out, I did 70 different schools in I don't know how many different states. It was crazy. I wasn't home much at all, but I loved it. And for me, it was good because I was recently divorced and I just dealt with it by working a lot. And I needed to because I needed to pay bills and get a place to stay and all of that. So, it's funny how things just they work out. They just do. And I don't know how to explain that, but some of the weirdest things happen, such as um so Phil found me on Instagram, but so did this casting agency that ended up asking if I would be a contestant on Lucky 13, the TV game show with Shaquille O'Neal. And I thought it was a scam, of course, but the funny thing was I was living in an apartment and when you're writing and speaking, so you're self-employed, you don't have a paycheck every 2 weeks. It's, like I did this author visit, so I get a paycheck, or royalties come every quarter. Like it's very sporadic. So trying to get approved for a loan to get a house, first of all, it was very humbling to get turned away when I lived in a really nice house. I've always worked hard. I have a master's degree. I mean, like I taught college. I mean, I'm right now still teaching college, but it was really it was hard because they would ask for proof of income and I couldn't give them like an exact amount that I would make that year because I didn't know. And so the amount that I was short, let's say that I was $50,000 is if I would have just had 50,000 more, I felt like I could get a loan big enough to be able to get a house that I would feel safe in. And by safe, I mean I'm a runner. I want to be able to go out my front door in the morning, be able to run at 5 in the morning in the dark and not feel scared. So in other words, I wanted to be in a decent neighborhood. And so I went on this game show and lo and behold, guess what? I won $50,000. Now, here, before you clap, just wait, because life throws us curveballs, as I'm demonstrating here. Um, the show went bankrupt. So I bought the house and drained my savings, knowing this money was coming in December, thinking it was coming in December. And the game show went bankrupt. And so, guess what? None of us have been paid, including Shaquille and Gina Rodriguez, who was the co host. And you know what? I'm telling you, things work out because 2 weeks before school started this year, Franklin College, which happens to be my alma mater, needed someone to teach a class and also wanted the person to get their early literacy endorsement. So that meant I needed to get the letters training and take the praxis and all these things to get another endorsement on my teaching license to be able to teach there. And guess what? The pay was $50,000. And it also had benefits. And so I have insurance. And so I'm telling you, like so many times, like I'm getting ready, not next week, but the week after, I am teaching it's a Dare to Dream workshop. And I was asked to be the person doing the first half of the day. And when I do these workshops, of course, I talk about the Ikigai. But the other thing where people get stuck is first of all, sometimes it's just figuring out like what they do want to do. And I'm not like in this to try to steer someone away from teaching or to change careers. It can be something like, you know what, I have always wanted to play in an orchestra and learn this instrument a little bit better so that I would be able to do that, or to act on a stage, or to do something creative with my life, or to run a podcast, or, some other thing besides, because I know our identity, and I really had a hard time when I left the classroom. Our identity is I'm a teacher, and it's hard to not to be anything but that. But there are other things that we are passionate about that we deserve to get to enjoy. And so it can be alongside teaching. And that's what I did for a long time. I was teaching and writing and loved it. And guess what? I was an incredible role model for my students as they saw me struggle through and get the rejections. And my thing with them was always anytime I get a contract, I do a cartwheel in the classroom, and they loved that. And so, they're celebrating with me. They're my beta readers. I'm like, they're listening to my stories as I write them. And it was just, it's a roller coaster ride, is what it is. And so, just to keep going here with this whole thing of now I'm teaching at Franklin and getting ready to start the second semester because they have a J term in January. So, we start back in February. And I realized that now that I'm doing more motivational speaking, that one of the things that I get on my soapbox about is that you have to stay in alignment with this. Like you figure out your ikigai and you've got to be true to that. You got to be true to you and what you really want to do because we only get this one life to live. I don't know if you've heard that poem by Linda Ellis, The Dash. Have you heard that? It's about your grave and you have your birthday and your death date and there's that dash. And our dash is the part that we live. And so making a difference with your dash is important because that's all we have. And so thinking about it in terms of, like determining your dash dream. What's your dash dream? Because we only get this one chance to do it all. And so, as I was reflecting on, for next year at the college, they said, now that I've got all my training done and everything, that took some of my workload away. So they now want me to teach 3 classes instead of the one and supervising teachers. And I was already having to go to the college 3 days a week because Mondays we have education meetings all afternoon and Tuesdays and Thursdays were my class. Well, now if I'm teaching 3 classes, guess what? I'm going to be there 3 or 4 days a week. And it's an hour commute from where I live. And so I had to make a really hard decision this past week that I mean, it's not that I just made it this week. I've been thinking about it, praying about it for a couple of months. But I had to go in last week and to be true to myself and to what I tell people to do, I had to tell them that I couldn't continue teaching there. And it was hard because that means, guess what? I no longer am going to have insurance starting in the fall. And I'm going to have to get private insurance. But you know what? Entrepreneurs do it all the time. It's not a unique situation. It just is unique to me because I'm used to having insurance through the school. And so it's one of those things. If you know Marie Forleo, she says everything is figure outable. I can figure out insurance, right? But what was happening is in the time that I had been teaching at Franklin, I haven't written a single story. A single story. It's killing me. Like I want to write. And I've had to turn down opportunities. A lot of my author visits are in other states. Well, if I'm tied to 3 days a week to be here, I can't fly somewhere and go do an author visit for a couple days at a school. And so I had to make that really hard decision as much as I loved. I mean, I have my own office at the college. It's very nostalgic because I'm teaching in the classroom that I used to have my education classes and my favorite professor. And it was a hard decision. And that is part of this whole process of figuring out your purpose and living it out too. Because it's not just enough to figure it out. You got to really do the hard stuff with it. So I met with my boss last week and we sat down together and I explained how much I love what I'm doing and I love writing and speaking full time. And I worked really hard to get to the point where I could do that full time. And so now I'm gonna get to go back to doing that and building my momentum again. But anyway, so I like I said, I'm just like going on and on and on. But just to say that you think, this path, this is it, and then you get this other idea or something happens, or you think it's good, but then guess what? One lesson I've learned is to hold things kind of loosely. I mean, like that game show. I mean, they're telling us that they're trying to find funding, but there are no guarantees if we're going to get paid at all. So my thought in my head is, you know what? It's just going to be an amazing bonus if I get it. And as you know, they're going to take like 40% off in taxes anyway. So it's not as big of an amount as, it sounds, but I'm just going to put it on my mortgage and that's that. And that'll be awesome. And if I don't get it, then that's okay too, because I know in my life I've been learning as I take more brave steps that good things are happening because I'm living in alignment with what I know is right to do. And so, that I guess would be my biggest message is don't be scared. Like when it's scary, it's probably something that you should do because it wouldn't be scaring you as much if it wasn't something that meant so much to you.
Hmm. Shannon, I love this. Thank you for you. It was great. I didn't have to ask any transition questions. You went into exactly what I was hoping for. Starting as that author, but that overlap into living the life you really wanted to. And I love your terms, like in alignment with what's true to you. And though that can be scary, that can also be incredibly inspiring, right? When we strap into a roller coaster, that fear and excitement feel exactly the same way,
Yeah.
and our
Yeah.
perspective shift if we're excited about it. And also, again, not everyone in here is specifically an educator, but a lot of us are in the education space and have experience with that. And again, not to sell ourselves short, we have a lot of skills in a lot of different areas. And I found me, and maybe Shannon, you could speak for that too. When I had another job outside of teaching, I felt more inspired in my teaching job as
Hmm.
well. When I became a
Absolutely.
public speaker, I felt like I became a better speaker to my high school students. I felt like without the red tape of my own business, I was super creative, which allowed me to feel energized when I came into work where maybe I was a little bit more restricted. So I
Mhm.
am a huge proponent and fan of whether it's the side hustle that turns into the dream or it's just the side hustle because damn it, you love it, the world needs it, it makes you feel good. I think it's
Mhm.
such a beautiful reminder to jump, try it, embrace the little failures, but yeah, enjoy the ride, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I'm kind of working on like in my head, I'm already starting to marinate a book that I actually have this book for teachers, writing from scratch, that comes out next week.
Yes.
But I'm trying to write another one that's not just for educators, but just for anyone that I'm playing around with a title, but I think it's maybe The Bumpy Road to Better, because it is a bumpy road. It is so bumpy, and but there are the times where we're high and that we're low. Like you said with the roller coaster, and in the end, if you keep writing, that eventually it does lead somewhere really amazing.
Yeah, and what a proud moment after 10 years that book gets published. Like your perseverance and just, kind of taking the licks when they came and eventually you found the right people, it worked out and then like you said, like look how well it did. It was worth the wait even though I'm sure for the 10 years it probably didn't feel like that, but I
Right.
mean, but now
Yeah.
that's an
And
incredible
that's a
story.
lesson that I mean, a lot of people that have failures and trials in their lives, like they're people that I want to learn from because I want and I want to be able to do that for other people is to share my story as an example that, yeah, this sucked. And yeah, this was terrible. But guess what? Like this happened and I tried this or I pivoted, like whatever needed to happen to make that go. Getting the TED Talk, that wasn't an easy thing either. Like, you don't just get to sign up and you don't get paid to do it or anything. Like, I actually had to drive to Michigan State University many times from Indiana for the practices and the meetings and all of the things. And I read both of the TED books, like cover to cover, and watched I can't tell you how many TED Talks to learn how to do it. And I applied for a year and a half before I finally got accepted. And you have to send in audition tapes and you have to do an interview and you have to fill out all these forms and you have to say, how will you take their theme and use your talk to fit their theme? And so it's not just even cut and paste stuff. Like, you have to fit to each person's theme and try it. And so there are things that are just hard, but then there's so much more worth it once you get there. And I love being able to tell kids that, like how much more worth it is. And not only that, so a couple years, well, actually last year, I've been taking neuroscience classes and I'm now a certified brain coach because I'm very interested in learning about how we learn and how things happen in our brains, and that those positive habits and mindsets make such a difference. And, it was one of those things where one of the courses that I took was $4,000. And was just doing it for funsies, I guess, because I wanted to know that. And I wanted to be able to have credible information to share with people when I'm doing my talks. And so I just did that. And so we have to also not be afraid to invest in ourselves, because initially I didn't invest in, if I hadn't gotten that fellowship, that grant money to start learning about writing for kids, I probably wouldn't have done it because I felt guilty investing in a dream that seemed like a silly pipe dream. And I'm like, my girls, I need to save for their college. I shouldn't be paying for some, like fun little, oh, I might write a book someday. I felt really guilty about that. So it was through that grant that I did invest. And then what that taught me was, oh, when I invest in myself and I work hard and I keep going, it's going to happen. Like, I'll make sure it happens someday. And so that's kind of what I did with the neuroscience thing. Was I was like, okay, so it costs a lot of money, but I'm going to get some valuable information that I can help other people with, and it'll help me too. And so I did it. And so there are just a lot of different things that I feel like as teachers, we are natural givers and we're nurturers and we want to do whatever we can and sacrifice so much for others. But we also can't pour from an empty cup. I know you've all heard this. And you have to be able to get inspiration and have someone pour into you and to be able to do things that fulfill you as well. And in doing that, like Phil said, you are a role model and you're able to share more outside experience with your kids in your classroom that is beyond valuable because they see you as not just the teacher of the things that you have to do for the standards, but also a teacher of life. And that's more important anyway, in my opinion. I mean, our kids need to know, like, how are we going to make it in life? Like, what are those characteristics and character traits we need to make a go of it?
Mm. Well said, Shannon. I know with the time coming up here, I just want to say we're kind of running short on time. I don't know if you have a few minutes in case afterwards, if anyone
Oh,
sticks
sure.
around for a couple questions. Is that okay,
Yeah, of
Shannon? All right,
course.
but everybody, I know that everyone's got different time frames and schedules. So to everyone who came that has to dip off for that, Shannon, thank you so much. You poured into us nonstop. It was wonderful, inspiring. So many takeaways. I can't wait to retype and send out to everyone as great reminders. But you are a true giver. The fact that you jumped on and poured into us, we're extremely grateful. So thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, and to
If
everyone who
anyone
came.
wants to reach out, I don't know if my easiest way to probably contact me is shannonisteaching.com. That's my website. And there's a contact me tab. So if you have further questions or whatever, you can contact me there. So
Yes, thank you so much, Shannon. This was wonderful.